Thinking about water, wastewater recycling is inevitable. I supported the yes for Toowoomba in a sense. I certainly didn't want to push it down their throats. I felt there was a bit of an effort to do that, and I think that was a shame, and I think that may have caused part of the backlash there at Toowoomba. Toowoomba could have been the first Australian city to recycle sewage as drinking water. I think it would have been wonderful for a town like that to show the big cities that they can think it through better than us. That didn't happen, but it's part of the process, and that's fine. Major cities have so far failed to address the issues of water recycling. The best studies indicate that 40% of Brisbane's water needs to be met through recycling. So why procrastinate? Why would we put these things off? Why not get on with the job of providing people with first-grade water from a recycling plant? Population. Now, I believe that population is at the heart and soul of conservation and environmental type issues. Current projections suggest that Australia's population will peak at between roughly 25 and 27 million people around 2050. So that's not that long to go before starting to slowly decline. The implications of a slowing of Australia's population growth rate needs to be fully understood by the broader community. Between now and 2050, where do we put the additional people though? How do we provide them with water? Why don't we have a national population policy? Everyone knows population is a key issue, but nobody wants to talk about it. It just seems strange to me. It's something we cannot fail to deal with. We must deal with it. We do represent an awful threat to plants and animals, you know, us people. There are too many of us living the wrong way in the wrong places. Population policy has a huge impact on environments. The concept of decentralisation in Australia failed spectacularly. I don't know, I never met the person who thought of it, but he or she or they, the committee, were dopes. The idea of sending a bunch of people out into the bloody wilderness never did work. I mean, they all but crucified Moses for trying it. And something as vague as that of go out into the bush and perish or populate or whatever it is just the worst thing. People want to live in fun areas where there are good jobs, good shops, good food, good roads, and above all, good people close at hand. Think of all those poor farming lads at the moment that are trying to stay on the land when most of the young girls in the area have left for the city. The parties aren't parties anymore. And it does come back to these sorts of human issues that if we're going to deal with populations, we've got to deal with them in a much better and more realistic way. Sydney is a classic example of city planning and population distribution gone mad. Sydney just creeps out and out, spreading like a melanoma. About 1 million people are, I've put in the notes, moving in, are being moved in to the northwest sector. I love all these phrases they use. That's out around Rouse Hill in Sydney. About 1 million people. In other words, more people than live in the ACT. Sydney has long since outgrown its water supply. While a piddling amount of water is recycled in that northwestern sector, overall Sydney simply can't supply water for another 1 million people. It just doesn't have it. The state government earns vast sums of money by misdirecting our population growth. Surely we need better committees controlling population distribution. We need to look for sexy areas for people to live where they can get a job, have fun, get water without destroying the local environment. And that's the challenge, not just send them off into the bush somewhere. It's not happening at the moment. Population policy at all levels has a huge impact on our environment, and most of the impact is far more negative than it could be. Then there are global population issues. What is the role for Australia in feeding, clothing and providing energy for the rapidly growing Asian economies? How do we cope with legitimate human aspirations in a world of limited resources? Well, what is the new era? The new era. Change is now sweeping the world at an incredibly rapid rate, far too fast for the world to cope. Not to be able to cope, but for the world to cope as it is at the moment. Over the last 200 years, 17 mammal species are thought to have become extinct in Australia. Less than 25 species have become extinct in the rest of the world during that period. Those are still misleading figures, by the way, because those vulnerable species that we did in 200 years were done a lot more than 200 years ago, everybody else. Nonetheless, Australian mammalian extinctions represent 40% of the world total since 1800. About 100 species of vascular plants, that's just sort of modern plants, have also become extinct in Australia over that period, as against a total of 140 in continental USA, Europe and Southern Africa. It's thought that around 7,723 animal species are endangered worldwide, and about 639 are endangered in Australia. Approximately 8,390 plant species are endangered worldwide, and 56 are endangered in Australia. We need to throw a saddle on this wild beast of change and ride it hard for the best outcomes. Less than 5% of Australia lies within national parks, and most of the rest of it is privately owned. National parks are too small, too separated and too poorly run to play the necessary part in saving Australia. If we are to save Australia, we must do it mostly on private property. Now, what does that mean? Well, for that to happen, all groups of citizens need to work together. Only a successful farmer can afford to preserve or even manage the key environmental parts of his or her land. You need money and expertise to sustainably manage Australia. The days of conservationists being at war with governments, farmers, developers, the fishing industry, etc. must end. The battle to save the world will be won by cooperation and collaboration, not by protests. You could well argue that the older conservation groups are now obsolete. They've created their own obsolescence by winning stage one of the fight to save the world. They must now change to continue to be effective or disappear.